Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to uncover the hidden secret behind successful software architecture. We look at these incredibly complex, beautifully functioning apps and systems every day, and we usually assume it's just the magic of some solitary technical genius working late into the night. But the reality of how these digital structures are built is way more collaborative and, frankly, a lot more fascinating. We're going to look at the absolutely crucial, yet totally overlooked foundation that makes sure our technology actually does what we need it to do in the real world.
Okay, let's dive into this. If you ask anyone in the tech world who really designs the architecture of a software system, almost everyone is going to give you the exact same answer: the solution architect. And, to be fair, they're right, but only partially. Because here's the honest truth. Without another key player in the room, even the absolute best, most mathematically elegant architecture can completely fail. Today, we're bringing our unsung hero into the spotlight, the business analyst. We're going to explore exactly why the top organizations in the world insist on involving business analysts literally from day one of the design process.
Now, to really get why this role is so critical, we first need to understand what they're helping to build. We're talking about high-level design, or HLD for short. Just think of the HLD as the ultimate architectural blueprint for a piece of software. It identifies all the major components, like the databases where your critical info lives, the APIs that let different pieces of software talk to each other, and the core technology choices holding the whole shebang together. Now, while the solution architects technically own this blueprint, they are completely dependent on business analysts to provide the solid business foundation that this entire design is built upon.
So, phase one, understanding the problem. This is exactly where our foundation gets poured.
Every successful architecture has to start with one really simple but incredibly important question. What business problem are we actually trying to solve? That's step one. The business analyst sits down with the stakeholders, gathers their requirements, identifies their real pain points, and documents exactly what the expected outcomes are. Once they truly know the problem, they move right to step two, defining functional requirements. In plain language, this just means figuring out what the system actually must do. The business analyst writes out user stories, maps out process flows, and clearly defines use cases. They're basically creating a plain English translation of the business needs, which then becomes the exact blueprint the architects will eventually translate into code.
There's a quote from our sources that hits the nail on the head here. It says, "Without this clarity, architects risk designing a technically brilliant solution that doesn't solve the real business need." Imagine a scenario where a company wants a simple, fast way for customers to reorder their favorite coffee right on their phones. If the business analyst isn't there to clearly define that specific goal, an architect might build a massive, complex e-commerce engine that takes 10 minutes and 15 clicks just to navigate. It might be technically brilliant, but it's a total failure for the business and the customer. That is exactly why this foundational clarity is literally everything.
Moving into phase two, expanding the blueprint. Here, we're looking at everything that goes way beyond just the visible features.
Because architecture isn't just driven by the features you can see and click on. What's really interesting is that these elements, performance, security, scalability, availability, compliance, and audit, are what we call non-functional requirements. The business analyst works closely with stakeholders to gather these precise details so the architects can make informed tech decisions. Without this step, well, actually, your app might look great at first, but it could completely crash the second 100 people log on at once. Or worse, it could be highly vulnerable to getting hacked. The BA ensures the system is actually designed to handle real-world pressure.
And hey, speaking of the real world, modern applications almost never operate totally alone. They're part of a massive, interconnected digital ecosystem. And this brings us to a vital step regarding integration and data flow. The business analyst is responsible for identifying all the external systems, the data flows, and the integration points our new software needs to connect with. By mapping all of this out in really easy-to-understand terms, the BA allows the architects to clearly define where their specific service begins and ends, and exactly what integration strategies are going to be required to make everything talk to each other seamlessly.
All right, phase three, rules, security, and final review. This is where we make sure the system doesn't just work, but it works securely and actually plays by the rules. So here are the final critical steps in the BA's journey. Step one is defining business rules, like who's actually allowed to access a certain feature, what exactly happens if a rule is violated. The business analyst figures all of this out, and then the architect decides where to actually implement it in the back end. Step two is setting security and compliance. The BA identifies what kind of privacy requirements, audit logs, and identity management the business legally needs.
And then we arrive at step 3, which is really the ultimate culmination of this partnership, reviewing the high-level design. Once the architect finishes that technical blueprint, the BA steps back in to review it entirely from a business perspective.
Now, put yourself in their shoes for a second. During that final gap review, before a single line of code is actually written, the business analyst is looking at the architect's highly technical design and asking these exact questions. Does it solve the original problem we established on day 1? Are all the possible scenarios covered? Have the edge cases been considered? Can this solution actually support our future growth? By asking these clear, simple questions, the BA identifies massive gaps before millions of dollars are wasted on development. And this brilliantly illustrates the core dynamic we've been unpacking today. You have two distinct but entirely complementary roles. On one side, the solution architect, they're the master of the how. They design exactly how the system is going to technically function. On the other side, you have the business analyst. They're the master of the what and the why. They define exactly what the system must achieve and why it even matters to the business in the first place. You simply cannot have one without the other and expect to succeed.
Which brings us to our final formula for success. Great architecture is not created by architects locked away in a room all by themselves. It's built through intense, continuous collaboration. Business analyst plus solution architect equals successful high-level design. It's a team effort that bridges the gap between human needs and technical possibilities, pulling in developers, QA teams, and stakeholders to ensure everyone is moving in the exact same direction.
So we've seen how vital this hidden role really is. If you're a business analyst, or honestly anyone who wants to lead projects and consult on solutions, you've got to start learning how to read and review high-level design documents. But really, this applies to all of us. When you understand the architecture of how things are built, you start seeing the matrix behind the products you use every single day. So I'll leave you with this. How will understanding architecture make you a stronger problem solver today? Think about it, and we'll see you in the next explainer.